We are going to explore the chart of Ra Uru Hu, as you can see, first designed to be first in awakening, with this penetrating awareness in the now through his brainwave, higher principles, the design of someone who can unconsciously structure, explain, insights, answers to the cosmic mysteries through occult knowledge, his ability to share he's an integrative type of being, freaky genius, you could say, and promise and prove a new way to find the higher self, to be a messenger of the form principle in order to share the memory of what he knew he could try in context with bringing revolution and delivering on the promise of this this unusual system that brought a cosmic kind of depth, and him being incredibly mysterious in his knowing in order to help us all overcome the limitations of the form and start off on a new journey. So his impact being someone who could bring the news cosmically and also practically of a new way, a new form principle emerging out of the ashes of the old into this new era. Being able to bring forth the mysteries of a creative self-expression, tearing down the old and leading forth the new through his practical example. Being able to manifest and materialize things that only he could bring. And so to all of you, specifically and especially in this time and era, we are all designed to be our own authority. And each one of you taking this information, this seeding, if you will, of the human design system out into the world to bring forth into form your own advice, guidance, response, recognition, awareness, your own information, to live this forth uniquely and truly as yourself was one of the things that Ra delighted in, to see his students emerge, and each one of you taking this knowledge and living and breathing it in your own lives was one of the things that he knew was absolutely a must in order for this knowledge to move out through and into the world. So I honor and thank each of you for doing whatever it is right for you to do to process and experiment, as well as experience what the human design system can do for you. So this is Ra Uru Hu, his prenatal imprint and the full natal imprint. We'll move through briefly his Saturn return, 1976, born in 1948. So you can see his, childhood, if you will. The end of childhood being the Saturn return, 1976. Then moving through into the Uranus opposition, which was to bring his mystical death and his cosmic awakening to this new era, to be a messenger or a herald, a prophet in his own country, or in his own island, you could say. And moving out into the world, the work really began, Chiron return, 1998, that he was called to be the messenger of, a contagious messenger of this knowledge, of this information to empower people. And he did a lot of work during that time until his death in 2011 that we will briefly go through. So in the prenatal imprint, you can see unconsciously, it looks to be as if he was a projector, but that is not what the aura is, because when we separate out the two, mental projector, it is not that the design itself is projector type, but that the unconscious awareness does have this capability. And you can see he was designed to fulfill his life's work through being able to walk the path of freaks, individualized knowing, expressed through the experimenting, and sometimes with the occasional mistake here or there, but structuring and again restructuring over and over until it really got to the foundation of the mysteries, where his unconscious brain-body system was designed to be able to get to the bottom of things in such a way that he not only structured those answers of the mysteries of life, but being able to share the details in a way that would be incredibly needed or prophetic when it came to how he would empower and impact those people out there in the world. It had to do with him being a manifestor, with his closed and repelling aura, as in we can see the natal imprint. The natal imprint bringing the rest of this manifested capability, creating the density. Manifestor auras have incredible impact and incredible density. And he was considered to be a freak. We know that this is the channel of structuring, a design of genius to freak, and that it was that he learned how to be incredibly efficient with his explanations over his life to be able to bring forth the system and have it impact people in such a profound way. So we take a look at then this Ra Uru Hu being a manifestor with splenic authority, the heretical investigator on the left angle cross of the Clarion. He was born Alan Robert Krakauer, the fourth child of a cultured upper middle class family. He was surrounded by the arts and learned to express himself through music, an avocation he pursued until his death. And at 13 years old, he said, when I turned 13, the global cycle became the first line, 1961. My whole life changed. My whole life changed. Suddenly I was able to go deep into things in a way that I was never, ever, ever thought was imaginable. And that he shared with the entirety of our reality. The whole world exploded into the mystical journey of finding inner truth through occult knowledge, starting in 1961. And that's where you find that the explosion of detail really originated, and we really have expanded on our knowledge. Just look around. There's an impossibility for all of us to know everything, isn't there? And there are so many different specialities when it comes to the first line era. So you can see that this manifestor with his splenic authority through the channel of awakening, a design of a commitment to higher principles, also brought forth too this brainwave, this design of penetrating awareness, and perfected form, this design of survival, in order for all of us to be empowered by his knowing. It was that he structured individuality, yes, on the path of serving the geniuses and the freaks, through this channel of initiation, a design of needing to be first, impacting and empowering all of us on this journey. So we see the Saturn, Uranus, and Chiron, 30s, 40s, and 50s, that we're about to move into, 30s being the end of childhood. Saturn prepares us for the Uranian, there we go, life. It does continue, the Saturn return. It never goes away. But there is a time when it is more in your face for Ra. In teaching of the program, he saw that it was often more useful after it was past, as in it, the Saturn return. So 1786 for him, 3.5 years after, our recommendation to all of you, 3.5 years after that Saturn return cycle, get your own 30s in order to analysis, in order to strip down, as in remove the crisis of, ending your childhood, and remove all of those things that should be put away, because it is the end of childhood at the end of the day. So it will put you face to face with your fears. And many people have deep not self-roots in your psyche. Because again, remember, the first 7 years of one's life is oftentimes the most deepest areas of conditioning because we do not recall what we went through. And it was a deep, vulnerable time for you, for me, to go through our first 7 years of our life. That formed the basis of our conditioning that we are not aware of. So Saturn drives us to try and live up to our societal expectations before and through the Saturn kind of 30s, you'll say, the mini earthquake to the foundations of your life. And it will enable all of us to shake off what's not really us. So for you too, should you have gone through the Saturn cycle, shake off what's not really you. This is what the analysis helps us to do. Saturn's other alias is the Lord of Karma, because Saturn shows us our reincarnative purpose. Saturn, as a planet, is here to test whether or not you can become your own authority. And usually it's most painful when one is not. So the pain point in anybody's design before you can align is that Saturn. So discover the unshakable core self within you, within your natal being. What is it that will become the basis for a lifetime of constriction, restraint, the foundation of one's mind in order to come to grips with the exhalation of one's life? This will be the basis of your growth. And what we can see here for Ra was to be a anarchistic leader and to have the kind of folly that would delight in sharing the answers that would be materially successful, although it would take some trial and error to get there. Okay, so this is the core of his Saturnian cycle. You can see when we have Saturn, because it moves so slowly, what it can do is create in you not just this particular activation that is the personality construct and its renewal, but on the body level, because it moves differently, you can see that there is a difference. And particularly, especially in Ra's return, we see it created a leadership strength, as in the channel of the Alpha, a design of leadership for good or bad, because of that Saturnian imprint. And so we see the movement towards purpose. That is what the Saturn cycle brings. It brings people into one's life. It brings opportunities for growth through the developmental learning and wisdom potential, whether that be educational or personal, whether that be something that is an interactive field. It is not just electromagnetic or compromise. In truth, for a transit, it is simply personal. Okay, there is no really difference, essentially. So when it comes to analysis of one's cycle, the main focus for anyone to look at is not just the incarnation cross. You can see for Ra, it was 6-2 that he was donning as a costume on top of his 5-1 role. And you can see he was 28 years old when the Saturn cycle happened. He lived in Toronto, Canada. He was running his own setup combination of an advertising agency and a TV production company. At 35, he had already been married 3 times. And in 1983, he moved to Ibiza. He taught at the Morna Valley School. And in 1985, he moved to the property where he would encounter the voice. This is a 6-2 left angle cross of wishes. This is the cycle data locally. It was October 24, 1976 at 8:32. And this left angle cross of wishes, you can see that the 50 values, the responsibility for the education of the tribe and the enforcement of values is where the core element of his fulfillment would be. And it happens to be that the 50 is in bonding as far as the relational bonding. So his personality construct being in a quarter of the wheel, which is about purpose fulfilled through mind. Then in this 30s and beyond, we're looking at the purpose of his life being through education, of the fulfillment of one's relational bond with others. And Ra would often talk about how it was not his, as in the system. It belonged to the world, to get out into the world, his students essentially, particularly in this particular class, that it was imperative that each student took this information into themselves in order to interpret individually, because all of us were seeded by the voice. But at this time, the voice would be the furthest thing from his mind. It really was a very different life that he lived until he came into his Uranus opposition. So we will talk briefly about the importance of the nodes. The nodes of the moon. Future, north node, past, south node. Think of them like little tiny cutaways or mini scenes within the movie of one's life, big picture view, essentially and particularly. So you have your own path that you're walking, and then you move through a new era, a new time, a new space, a new place. So you can see that the commonality between these two is the second line environmentally and contextually with the way that one sees one's life experience. So we'll begin with the preponderance of the great, the gate of the great, the great gate of the game player, the risk taker. This is the transitoriness of power and influence. The second line reads, shaking hands with the devil. And the 27.2 in the first part of one's life, or this time of his life, the experience, is nourishment, the gate of caring. It's the enhancement of the quality and the substance of all activities through caring. The second line reads, self-sufficiency. So in this personality viewpoint, environmentally, directionally, we can say, he was seeing that purpose cannot be found without intelligence, and seeing that purpose is limited to the level of intelligence. To see that purpose can be nourished through strategic thinking, this is, after all, pointed at and within the splenic center, which is strategic. It's about survival, after all. And that purpose can be denied when there is no clear strategy. The element of this would be looking for God, looking for the devil, looking for anything that will give some sense of life's purpose, because this is about the purpose in life. You might find it in sex, find it in drugs, find it in anything. But here we're looking at it being very particular to a call. Shy or bold people might be, especially in one's view. Now, on the body side, the body context of the environmental framing, we see that it is also splenic, coming to meet the gate of alertness. The success of any interaction is based on the absence of any preconditioned. Second line being about management. And that was the North Node, directionally speaking, environmental context that he was moving through for this cycle. The return, gate of rationalization, which is the natural and spontaneous process of transformation and renewal. The second line of recognition. So what's interesting to me is in knowing Ra's chart that he has the 26 as well as the 61, that we would have contextually in the environmental context, people that he would encounter within the environment that would put him firmly on this path, moving through ending of childhood and into the dawn of a new awakening, which had to begin with his mystical death at the Uranus opposition. So he was walking through an environment of intellectuality, the environment that is full of spontaneous transformation and renewal. Now, if you too have this, if you're operating out of not self, the environment can appear to be very disturbing. It can lead to a deep sense of melancholy if there is no transformation and no renewal. If there is no transformation and no renewal, if one does not experience transformation and renewal, remember disempowerment as a keynote because of its individuality. There may be a fear and a tension in the alertness that's going to exist in the environment. This is fear of the past. This is fear of ignorance. It's an environment in which deals will not work. Now, if you're busily involving yourself in arrangements in which you have to make a bargain in order to hope to get to where you want to go to, you're absolutely in the wrong place. Because the right environment for you is an environment without preconditions. Remember, the absence of any preconditions is predicated as far as the need for the success of any interaction. It's predicated upon the absence of any preconditions. This is what it is to come to meet. So to release preconditions when it comes to deals and bargains is one of the truths inherent within the 42, particularly here, his path, if you will, that he was walking. Attuned to those who are also shy and bold, who are naturals relative to the path that he was walking. It was filled with people who are gifted, talented, brilliant, because the two is tending to be that way, and also unaware. There is an inherent unawareness with the two that needs to be called, and so too, he was walking through a path filled with these kinds of beings, the naturals, the gifted. Now let's put the cross into that context, the left angle cross of wishes. This is the cross that is the most culturally threatening of crosses, because the 6-2 is ready to transcend the traditional value and look for some larger transcendent value. This is about the wish to be able to find the utopian value system, and that begins by being open to other value systems. Here, the gate of values, the values inherent within the fulfillment of this life purpose. So Ra was learning how to move through and develop this talent, okay, of the capability of having influence, my apologies, influence. It might have been seen as arrogant, his body, as he was learning how to be so picky, so selective, his unconscious awareness being rounded into caution, that gate of contraction. So these are beings who have great agency. For all of us who want to be able to wake up, any sixth line can be the Buddha, Bodhisattva, being able to get beyond, above it all, and look beyond, to see beyond. So these are beings who would like to wake everybody up if they are called, potentially, and especially if they can have that kind of leadership, okay, that kind of outer authority. So, as a quote, Ra would say, you know that God over there and this one here, they are really the same. They do the same job, they just have different names, unquote. Thus, these are beings who can have quite a disturbed karma in their life, if this is you especially too, obviously. You have a transpersonal karma with others. So karmically, you are probably going to end up in geometries where you are going to do this job of attempting to, if you are called, wake everybody up. The 6-2, archetypally speaking, being that role model that other people look to, particularly at their 50s and beyond. So you might have quite a life experience, because there's always going to be situations in when your openness to other values might potentially create all kinds of risks for you in your own process. Now, this is based on the Global Incarnation Index. That was from page 115 to 116. Okay, so when it comes to putting it into context, here the keynotes of leadership, arrogance, caution, and this last one we did not yet touch upon, surrender, okay, in his particular line qualities. We are combining the keynotes of the sun and earth on either side of this left angle cross of wishes. The cauldron is the gate of values, that gate 50. It's the value of historical continuity whose traditional values serve and enrich the present and the future. Ra was learning about leadership. How does one lead accordingly with the values of the tribe? Well, on one side of this spectrum, the extreme, it's the gift in a position of power to maintain harmony even in severity. The strength to maintain one's values with vigor and to continue to have harmonic relationships with others. Venus brings us that influence. On the flip side, the moon can bring an inherent moodiness that, in a position of power, may at times alienate or offend and affect overall efficiency. In other words, this is the strength to maintain one's values, but at the expense of harmonic relationships. The relational dynamic between the this and that of the two polarities or the extremes of this line quality of value leadership, valued leadership, or responsible leadership is about learning the harmonic relationships with others make a difference in order to lead leadership in context with the personality awareness construct. And where that is being grounded, these values, is into a very difficult place in the hexagram mandala wheel. This is difficulty at the beginning's third line, gate of ordering. It brings this fundamental challenge of initiation, which is to transcend confusion and establish order. The sixth line is that of surrender. The surrender reads, let's go find it here, the ultimate maturity to recognize when struggle is futile. When struggle is futile, the sun exalts. As its light sustains, so life goes on. The innate acceptance that ordering is a process, not a problem. As darkness overwhelms on the flip side, that's Pluto in detriment. Life can seem worthless, leading to depression and a sense of hopelessness. In other words, this is the overwhelming power of confused energy, which can lead to depression. Now, what we're looking at is the fact that in Ra's natal design, he already had his own 60. So you will find that when we have a very strong impact from the cycle, whatever it happens to be, with that person's own design, particularly and especially, this is a personal connectivity field, that this channel would be a conditioning influence that would move one towards purpose. This is mutation. And so you can see his Saturn cycle, 28 years old, being very mutative of him. And if you go and listen to his stories of what led to his complete renunciation of his entirety of his first life that he lived in Toronto and moving to the island of Ibiza, that it was a tremendous change, an incredibly impactful, mutative change. In fact, you can see 3 different new mutative channels coming through, in addition to the entirety of integration being there in his cycle. Okay. Oops, I just took the wrong presentation away. But I do need to bring this one back with me so that I can reference it as I talk to you. Okay, just a moment. Many windows. There we go. Time to move back To put this into context with this particular cycle, we see that this being is someone who is individually designed to be not only impactful, but also impacted by a very different time of his life. That time being to go through and into his own personal awakening, that process of developmental awareness to move beyond, to develop his own Buddha nature. So, when he moved to the property where he would encounter the voice, it was 1985. And this cycle again happened December 18, 1986. So it shows how the Saturn return actually takes 3.5 years before the cycle for the body to be prepared for this encounter. Ra would oftentimes talk about the cycles as encounters, each of us going through our own encounters. These are always people in the small inner planets, and potentially out in the outer planets. This is a developmental theme. Okay. So now we're not going to go into the detailed depths of everything else that would come into somebody's life if you were going through the deeper educational process of learning how to analyze life cycles. All right, so Uranus opposition is next, and here's really where Ra gives us an incredible story in Dying Death and Bardo, his mystical death, in order to prepare for his encounter with the voice. There was an incredible story as far as what he went through. Okay, so now the Uranus opposition, we see the juxtaposition cross of ideas. Okay, 38 years old, the encounter happened in 1987. There we go. 1987 was the encounter. And then we had in 89, the creation of the first Rave I Ching. Now he told the story between of what happened right up leading to the encounter and then what happened after for the encounter with the voice. And you can hear all his story about the encounter itself. But you can see that there's 2 years between this and that as far as writing the first Rave I Ching. And then in 1991, the first design analyst training was born. 1992, the Human Design School was established, further moving into the International Human Design Schools later on down the road. And then in 1993, the basic course, his first recorded class, and the introduction of neutrinos through Windows software. 1998, Ra settles with his family in Taos, New Mexico, and his wife Ambuja Riley gives birth to a son. Financial difficulties due to the fact that Ra's son was born prematurely. And you can see the Uranus opposition here again, 4-1 juxtaposition cross of ideas. Let's go and explore this story during that time of his early 40s, because it technically began at 38 years old. So 38 for Ra in his Uranus opposition. We can see that we have a first line and a fourth line, which is quite interesting to me because we see the same thing happening up here. Uranus opposition, 4 and 1. Also, too, the nodal environment, 4 and 1. When you see something like that, whether it be in somebody's natal design, as you can see, it's not with Ra, but in a cycle, either or, you know that this is incredibly fixed because, you know, the 4-1 is fixed fate anyway. But you see that combined with the nodal environment, you're seeing somebody who was designed to be on a very fixed track during that time. Oh, I went way too far. That was into his death. My apologies. Hang on. Skipped a little too far. What? It did it again. Okay. I'm getting a bit cold here. There. Okay. Uranus opposition, 1986. Okay, let's take a look at this particular piece, the arousing the gate of shock, gate 51. This is the path of seeing and being able to have the ability to respond to disorder and shock through recognition and adaptation. That fourth line is a line of limitation. The 57-4, we're looking at the gentle gate of intuitive clarity, which brings an extraordinary power of clarity. And the fourth line is the director. So, seeing things that truly shock the other. Seeing the influence of a world in which there is fear of tomorrow. You'll see it and you'll hear all of that. You'll know that through what people say because you can hear it in the acoustic frequency. Remember, the 57 is the right ear, about hearing fear and hearing, penetrating awareness of that fear, the influence of fear in the fourth line quality. So Ra says that when you're looking out into the world, what you're looking for or what you're tuned into is certain things you hear out there in the world. You can pick up on gossip as an example, especially here with the fourth line. Fourth lines, yeah, gossip or not, potentially. So hearing a lot of stuff that is influential and shocking, particularly when it comes to the fear of what tomorrow may bring, because that is what the 47 or 57 is. Now, on the unconscious path, the directional node, this is a very destable or unstable environment. Increase the gate of growth, the movement towards the expansion of resources, which maximizes the development of full potential. First line reads diversification. The 32, 1, this is the gate of duration, gate of continuity, which is the only thing that endures is change. First line is conservation, being incredibly conservative. So this is an environment where people are afraid of failure and driven to think that growth is the answer. It's fundamentally unstable because that growth is littered with problems because you're entering into something that is new and attempting to grow through it. The fear is of failure of the material plane, and an inability to thrive. So if one cannot grow properly, this is the stage, the fear here, and moving towards the endings of things, and 42 being a gate of endings. So we're looking at the first line quality comparatively with the fourth line quality, a very fixed environment specifically, where people he sees would have been dealing with exhaustion and people fatigue, and also the networks of being influential. And at the first line level, the body being about study, research, investigation into the people that he was encountering, into the fears of the material plane, failure, not being able to expand, also on education, interestingly, on the capability of finding the awareness to get over the fear of failure and help those who are ambitious move through that fear and bring about that close of a cycle. That's what the 42 can bring, endings. So we're looking at that as the stage, and he having a 4-1 juxtaposition cross of ideas going through this particular life process. We're looking at someone who learned how to be, in this case, this is Ra's Uranus opposition, learning how to be very, very fixed in trying to get their ideas out. Ra says that they may be voices in the wilderness. That is, nobody may hear them. And if this is you, you may also, too, have a deep influence, because the juxtaposition cross of ideas, you are designed to be archetypally a teacher, okay? A teacher, which is a repeating to the line quality of what a first line archetypally can be as well at the body line level, because the true teachers are the bodies who are one, accordingly to Ra Uru Hu. So The teacher reads the ability to express the essential nature of peace. Now, these teachers can be very important teachers in the nature of how the cosmos works. They are the great teachers of the nature of the body, because you can see that the body happens to be here in gate 46, pushing upward. This is the gate of the determination of the self, the love of the body. This is good fortune that may be perceived as a result of serendipity, but it derives from effort and dedication. First line reads, being discovered, the love of the form. So teaching the love of the form through these ideas that express the essential nature of peace. So this is somebody who has the capability of expressing, sharing the ideas about how the body works, not just about the body and being in the right place in the right time, at the right time. From a scientific point of view, they can be very important in our development of ideas and also concepts about the nature of our form, this human being form principle. Now, this incarnation cross is deeply mentally fixed. The dilemma is you can just get stuck on an idea. So if you get stuck that your idea is, let's say here, the sun in detriment reads the guru, because this is where the sun was. So it would only express as the guru, whose most valued wisdom is intentionally limited to a few. In other words, this is for Ra going through his Uranus oppositions. He fixedly got his ideas out into the world, but it could only be grasped by the few. And where that was grounded in the gate of caution, stand still, the quality of restraint and the importance of meditation and inaction in confronting temptation. The fourth line reads the prophet. So his prophet capability, not just because of his nature of being someone who could bring this out into the world, but also sharing his ideas personally. Diagnosis-wise, what can happen here is, besides this pushing upward, being discovered, the body, in a sense, innocence, the spirit of the self, what is grounded for him is selflessness, or the perfection of action through uncontrived and spontaneous nature. It is in detriment because of the design fixing of his own Mercury. So his tendency to publicize his selflessness or the insecurity of the self manifested in times of challenge was something that Ra himself pulled this particular cross into. So what can happen here is being diagnosed as obsessive and delusional. When you don't notice this is when the idea somehow fits into whatever the mundane world happens to be, when it appears to have some sense to it. And this was both from the Global Incarnation Index, page 137, as well as the Incarnation Crosses by profile. This happens to be in quarter 4. So incredibly mutative, this particular version of the, or not version, because there's only one juxtaposition cross of ideas, okay? Because there is only one unique cross label per juxtaposition cross. All right, so we're looking at the capability of understanding that this being, this juxtaposition cross of ideas, his development of his purpose, because again, remember, that is what a cycle is. And for Ra, this happened at 38 years old. So 3.5 years before, he would have prepared for this movement towards purpose by an unusual shift. Again, remember, Uranus brings sudden, shocking, potentially destabilizing, erratic, innovative, unusual shifts. And what's interesting to note is that we have the Sun and Uranus in conjunction here with this gate of ideas, okay? The ability to bring about peace. And isn't it true? I don't know about you, but for me, it is true. that regardless of what this body, this form is going through, and even more difficult to deal with is the mind and its process of interpreting what the form principle happens to be doing. That the human design experiment, through our experience of the experimentation, individually and uniquely, we can find the acceptance of self, first through understanding, and then through discovering the experiential process of what it's like to be individually aware of the concretization of one's energy into this form principle. So by moving through the experiential process to your own process of experimenting with the logic of the human design system, you can find your own principles of awareness and how it works truly for you. Now, finally, we have the last of the cycles before we go through his death process. And this is the Chiron return. Chiron return bringing good conditioning, absolutely necessary in order to fulfill one's life's work. 1998. Chiron is the marker. It was discovered in the 1970s. This is the source of our wounded healer mythology. The old burnout point of 50 for the seven-centered being, it was 30 that the death process happened. But now it's the beginning of our flowering stage, especially and most specifically in this current background frequency shift into the sixth line era. All of us being conditioned by that sixth line process. In that, not only is it true that all six lines go through a tripartite life's process too, but you and me, everyone, are being conditioned by the shift in the background frequency for us to emerge at 50 and have the full flowering of our human potential be planted quite nicely in the fertile soil of our environmental context, or the nodal environment especially, which is why it's so important for us to take into context the nodes when we talk about the incarnative process, planting of one's purpose, or even in the cycle itself, to talk about the nodes when it comes to the fully flowering human potential. So Chiron being a very small object, it's about the size of the Manhattan Island between the orbits of Saturn and Uranus. It's caught between the pull of both Saturn and Uranus. It represents the movement from Saturn to our Uranian age, or our Uranian stage, if you will. Because remember, for us who are human here and now, this Saturn-Uranus-Chiron cyclical process of development, we have this continuation of not only the seven-centered model, but moving into the nine, and then through to that flowering of the developmental process of what it is to be a nine-centered human being. So Chiron is not, as a planetary asteroid, not part of the imprinting program according to human design. It is not in the body graph. However, when it comes to what happens to each of us, what happens to you potentially as you learn about what it is to be a nine-centered human being. We take the Chiron return as far as where it was natally when we were born, and we look to that cycle to see the fullest developmental process, the true self archetypally. Now, it doesn't change one's auric frequency, nor does it change one's authority. But again, good conditioning absolutely necessary in order for you to fulfill your life's work. The new role, you can see the 2-4 in Ra's case on top of this 5-1 natal design. So being called to be a contagion of his confirmation of self, as in his fullest flowering and human potential of being someone who was designed to step into the nature of being someone who could absolutely be the Clarion to bring the news of the new model, the new age, and the new stage through the development of his mind's process and the mutation of the form, to go through his own death and rebirth, not only individually, but also specifically with the knowledge, with the material. If you go and listen to or read, whichever is correct for you, how he went through his encounter with the voice and then further to the development of the knowledge, you'll see the difficulty at the beginning. We who are human design analysts are pioneers that are opening up a whole new segment of nine-centered awakening or life purpose for people. Just think, if only the whole world knew that life began at 50. Can you imagine? Everyone thinking that they're over the hill, that there's, it's the end because, of course, incredibly so, there are so many different challenges to the physicality in this age and stage because of the toxicity of the planets that we are living through and the lack of the nutrients that are being delivered to us because of the poisons and because of the challenges of feeding 8 billion people sustainably. This is the time to have the full flowering of you being and living as yourself at 50. It's not about the degradation or the decrepitedness of the form. So how can we move through this difficult time period? All of us going through an incredible mutation. You can see that Ra's going through this mutation too for his Chiron cycle. The time to be you is here and now. Don't put it off for the future. You are living and breathing here and now. Keep this magic in mind, this focus as far as the attention to the being, your being yourself. This is about being your own authority. Now, at the age of 50, in 1999, the Jovian Archive Corporation was founded by Ra and family. It was incorporated originally in Canada, I believe. So the start of the Jovian Archive.com in 2000, where Ra and his family moved from USA to Germany. And then in 2003, they returned from Germany back to Ibiza, and he announced his retirement on his 55th birthday. The 2006 year brought the recording of the encounter with the voice. And in 2010, it was the introduction of the new Jovian Archive website, where Ra's mother also too passed away that year. He was 50. The cycle of the Chiron return locally was November 18th, 1998 at 3:31 locally. The cycle cross is the right angle cross of contagion, to be called, to be influential when it comes to getting people on board the commitment of dedicating themselves to the experience and the experiment. As a right angle cross of contagion, this is about, archetypally speaking, the power skills that lead one to empowering the direction of the cross. You can see here what is being fueled is not only love, but also direction, a very specific direction, that fuel, that power skills coming through this right angle cross of contagion. Let's go into looking at the nodes first, because this is the fertile soil or field, if you will. The planting of this cross of contagion was through these nodes, interestingly, happen to be my sun and earth. So we begin with the abysmal, the gate of perseverance, the deep within the deep. Persistence, despite difficulties, has its inevitable rewards. The third line reads, evaluation. And where it's coming from is the clinging fire, the gate of desire, the gate of feelings and fate, where freedom is recognized as an illusion and limitation accepted as a fate. The third line reads resignation. And basically, it is simply about acceptance, the acceptance of one's feelings and fate. So in this environmental context, this is about seeing that people would commit, that they're ready for the experience. Seeing those people who are experimental and experimenting, the third line particularly. People who are ready for the experience, but oops, fate steps in. The commitments that people should be careful about, absolutely. Instead of being half-heartedly committed to the depth of any experience, it is about feeling into the form principle and moving along in that direction of discovery. So the people who are ready for the experience, but they get screwed up by fate. Hi, that's me. Fate steps in, regardless of the best laid plans of mice and men. On the body side, we can see that this is dispersion, the gate of sexuality, the ability to break down barriers in order to achieve union. Second line reads shyness. And the abundance, which is strictly a question of spirit, gate of spirit. Second line reads here, distrust. It's an environment of emotional uncertainty where there is this movement from spirit that embraces it and the spirit that loses its very innocence. An environment where the emotional system is not operating correctly. And then emotional decisions are being made in the now where there is no truth, as we know. An environment where uncertainty, this uncertainty principle that is inherent in that 55th gate, can lead to a world of emotional confusion that becomes a need for bonding with an other. So we're looking at contextually in the environment that he was walking along in this path on his trajectory, that there was a lot of distrust, slander, which hampers abundance, or gossip is another way you could say that too, as part of the fulfillment of one's purpose. So the path being filled with talented people who are shy, vacillation, the 55 can be fickle is the right word. Okay, incredibly uncertain. Oh boy, do I know that one. Okay, so we're working with people who are talented and looking for bonding, but shy and potentially vacillating between shyness and boldness. And then being able to see those people who are determined and adaptable and resilient to discover through the trial and error process those things that do not work. Okay. In that path and on that trajectory, this right angle cross of contagion, these are people, hi, that's me, where we're looking at an ability to bring other people together and amass their energy, not only for direction, but also for commitment. We have the ability here with this 14 to invest their resources to get them behind, empowered with a kind of unique, individual, distinct direction where we're looking at the power skills are the accumulation and retention of power through skilled interaction, coupling grace with control. The second line reads management. This is about the wisdom that investing in expertise brings rewards. Jupiter expands, brings expansion. The ability to delegate responsibility. The key to power lies in not trying to be and do everything alone. On the flip side, Mars detriments, the vanity to be one's own best expert. The key to power is doing everything individually in the line quality. Now, where that is grounded is in the gate 8, holding together the gate of contribution, the basic worth realized in contributing individual efforts towards group goals to be of service. So Ra was able to get other people to make commitments, and his contribution as far as how he could be of service during this time was not only to get other people to make commitments, but to get people to invest their resources. He sold rights to human design when he retired in order to have this material move out into the world to different fractal lines. He himself said his own personal fractal was very narrow. Well, that's quite interesting to me because there are so many I don't know how many millions of people affected by his information. I would say that that's a pretty large fractal. But then in context, if we compare it to how many of us who have dedicated our lives to learning, to master, and then to put out this information into the world is quite something to see. Wouldn't you agree? There are so many people, even though it's a small slice of humanity, there are so many people out there doing this work now. It's quite lovely to see. Because each of you taking up the standard too of the fire that burns inside for individuality, this burning desire that I have for each of you to take it out to your fractal, however it is correct for you to do. I can definitely relate. Now, the way in which any right angle cross of contagion will do this work is to, and this for him, it was about the calling, is to be observant of the things that fall into our lives, these possibilities that jump into our lives, because it's an encounter, you know? It's not like we're out there looking for, here's what I'm going to do. It's our own material process, because a right angle cross of contagion is personal destiny. So if you're like me, or going through a cycle too of a right angle cross of contagion, it's just you're absorbed in your own material needs. Because look, 14 and 8 are about the empowerment of one's individual direction, and it's very much about business. This is the core of the penta, or the small grouping, the true self in business. So it's a theme of being focused on finding the right direction. Ra himself had a 2. So he had the power skills to be a director internationally, and then to step down when it was correct for him to do so. So we wait for these moments to make the commitment to the right direction in life. And when the right direction comes, now we have fuel. This is fuel. The 14 brings the power skills. It is a wealth gate. It is the capability to empower creatively, to sustain creative regeneration or creativity. It is an incredible gate. And with the right direction coming, that right fuel, this means then that there is going to be success in your life. If you're a right angle cross of contagion, you are designed for it, built for it. This is part of your destiny. The right angle cross carries, in this particular energetic, especially and most specifically, 4th line, burnout, as one of your dominant themes, regardless if you've got the 2-4 here though. But I'll tell you, especially with Ra, burnout, because of the 4th line. You can see the keynote right there, burnout. That's where we get it from, burnout. So we're looking at unconsciously the body and its 4th line capability, influence. We're seeing the abysmal, the deep within the deep. This is the gate of perseverance. And it reads how persistence, despite difficulties, has its inevitable rewards. This is a blind commitment to things. That's the 29. Okay, the blind commitment being a keynote of the 29. But through that blind commitment, there is potentially an eventual burning out. That's the grounding. The clinging fire gate of desire, feelings, and fate. It's freedom recognized as an illusion, and limitation accepted as a fate. So now, with this light of burnout especially, there were all kinds of people there in Ra's life trying to get him to be able to commit himself to make a promise, to provide energy, to bring the benefits of potential wealth. Look at how many beings he sold rights to around the world. Now, this particular interpretation was based on, again, the Global Incarnation Index. That one was on page 137, besides, of course, the Ray Ching in my personal experience. So we're looking at a cycle of not only this process of being called to really put it out there into the world in a big way, and to recognize his own limitations, that he could not do it alone. It's one of the contributions you get from me, you know, just as I do. I cannot do this work alone. Cannot do it without you. It takes more than one being to get this world out into the world. Each one of you individually has the capacity to do this work uniquely. And it is especially true that Ra wanted this for you, to do your work individually, personally, from your own lived experience. It is our responsibility to hold fast and true to our own personal authority, whatever it happens to be for you.